Like to welcome everyone today. And, it's been 1 year since the Freedom Convoy, or some may call it the occupation that was in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. As a recovering journalist, I have been spending some time really doing some research, looking at coverage of a lot of issues in the mainstream, in alternative media, and in social media, ranging from a lot of different topics. But today I wanted to address at the 1 year anniversary of this convoy, because it did have such an impact, not only on Canada, but also on the world. And there's a lot of things that I noticed as I've been doing some research again over this past year in particular, about how things are covered. And as I said, being a curious person and as well as a recovering journalist, I think it's really important that we look deep into the why behind stories. So today, I have a very special guest. This was a woman who, before 2020, was not an activist. In fact, she owned a construction company. She had a hunting lodge, and she was someone who was kind of going about her life. And then we got into the pandemic, and things for her definitely started to change. And she also is a fellow curiosity seeker. And one of the things that I noticed about her, because I first saw her on social media, and I was really impressed with the research she was doing and her knowledge of a lot of different areas. And I'm always someone who likes to curate my feeds and curate where I'm getting my information from. Okay, I'm going to welcome this guest now. So we'll just talk a little bit about how we then reconnected.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, Michelle. Welcome. And thank you for being a guest on Curious Minds. And as I said, I'll give a bit of background of I had met you virtually. Well, actually, I hadn't even met you. I was watching some of your content on TikTok. For those of you that don't know, I'm on all platforms, and on TikTok, I have rigged it so that I watch things even that I don't agree with. So I have seen and heard from a wide range of people because I watch different perspectives. And you were someone that I started following and watching. And then I was in Toronto for a conference totally unrelated to anything related to Convoy. I come out of the elevator,
Poof.
and I recognized you.
Yeah, I'm a dirty penny. I show up everywhere.
Well, Michelle, and you have, your background story. Part of, being curious is really about getting to know people and doing some research. So I've done a bit of research on you and who you are. And that's why I wanted to have you on as a guest, because you're someone that I believe has, a lot of times people want to attack people that are advocates or that are out protesting. So let's dive right in for people that are coming here, watching, wanting to know, like 1 year later of the convoy. Let's go back to prior to the convoy in Ottawa. And how did you end up from being construction owner, not someone who was out protesting in the streets, to someone off to a protest?
Sure. So I had been living between British Columbia and Alberta. I had businesses in both provinces. And March 11, 2020 hit, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And I said, absolutely. I mean, I was watching what was happening in the rest of the world, people dropping, field hospital camps going up in China overnight. And I thought, okay, you know what? This is real. So I hunkered down, and then the weeks went by, and I just started to get a really funny feeling about things. So my partner and I went to the hunting lodge, and we just decided to stay up at this off the grid hunting lodge for the entire duration of 2020. And we opened it up as a little bit of an Airbnb. So it was people to come and visit and just spend time in the backcountry, just sort of free from all the mandates and all of that. And I I support whatever the government was doing to a certain extent, because I figured if we don't know what we don't know, I'm going to trust the experts. So I took a really balanced approach to it, but for myself, I never felt that I was in jeopardy. A healthy person, I maintain my weight, and I don't have any comorbidities. So, like, I just sort of let life kind of go on. And then the vaccine mandates came, and that affected me. And I'll admit that once it affected me directly, I thought, you know what? Once I'm being singled out, I got to put a stop to this. So I wasn't able to get the vaccination because of an autoimmune disorder. My doctor recommended that I don't. So I couldn't get a doctor's exclusion. And I thought, oh my goodness, there's a lot of people like me out there who either got their first jab, got hurt, don't want the second one, don't want it at all. That's a personal health choice, or couldn't get it because of a health reason. And I thought, my goodness, how is it that we can be excluded from society? So when the Freedom Convoy rolled out in January of 2020, what was it, 2022, I
Yeah.
thought, this is something that I can do. And I packed up the dogs in my trailer and I joined the convoy. And a week later, after leaving Canmore, Alberta, I was parked on Metcalfe and Albert, downtown Ottawa.
So now, when I started this too, we talked about, the 1 year later, looking back, do you regret being part of the convoy after we've seen a lot of coverage, certainly by mainstream media, that um, certainly painted the people who attended in to put it kindly, a not very positive light?
If I have any regret over the last 3 years, it's that I didn't get active earlier. So I did more passive resistance by opening up my lodge. That was my, my quiet riot. That was my personal resistance. I wrote letters, I made phone calls. But now I wish I'd actually done more in the streets locally. But do I regret going to Ottawa? No. And I do it all over again.
And you mentioned something very telling was about, because one of the early things I noticed about you, and you mentioned, you had an autoimmune
Mhm.
disease. Do you feel comfortable talking about that? And
Sure.
the because that there was a lot of attacks on you that I noticed when you were initially on social media.
Absolutely. I mean, to look at me, you may not know from this far away, but if I get real close, you can tell that I don't have eyebrows or eyelashes, and I wear what they call a cranial prosthesis. Um, and I have ever since I was 10 years old. So when I'm online on video, when things are a little bit closer, yes, you can tell that I don't have any eyebrows. And it's amazing how the tolerant left really attacks and goes for those, wear your eyebrows. And they do make fun of me and laugh at me. And they think it's a big joke. I don't care. You can laugh at how I look all day long. It doesn't matter to me. I know who I am inside. Um, but it has been really amusing to me that people will attack me for how I look.
And you actually have alopecia, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So when I was 10 years old, my hair started to fall out in what I call crop circles, all different sizes all around my cranium. And it was diagnosed as alopecia areata, and did a variety of things through my teens to help my hair grow back. And then when I got mono in university, it all fell out and it never grew back again. So I just went with it and got nice wigs, and no harm, no foul. So that for me was just, okay, this is just my thing that I've got, and I just take it through. I just didn't realize how it would affect me in 2021 when the vaccine rolled out, and there were five groups of people they recommend not get the vaccine right away, and one of them was people with autoimmune disorders, because they admit that they never tested the injection on anyone who had an autoimmune disorder. So my doctor and I agreed that I would wait, and then the longer that I waited, actually my concern level about it went up, and then I just never got it.
Wow. You know, yeah, I must say one of the things that I really found also most appalling was, when people comment, if you're taking a position on something, I don't know why people have to be mean. And I come, as you know, I'm a former journalist, and one of the things that I have really been focused on recently is the level of negativity and attacks, especially on social media, if you have a different view.
Oh,
And this has been what caught my attention about the convoy, is that because I interviewed people that went up to Ottawa. I also knew people that went up that weren't like rabble rousers or whatever. They weren't people who, they were curious.
mhm.
And I have another story where I have a friend that lives up in that area, and she, out of curiosity, was just walking around one night. And
Yeah,
this is really interesting about social media. So she was just curious. She thought, okay, I'm going to go just talk to it. And
yeah,
again, non-political, nothing.
yeah,
And I was saying, I said, hey, take some photos. And so she was sending them to me through Messenger.
yeah.
She then had something pop up on her phone. I just want to get this right because I wrote it down, because I was like, that is, she said, you have sent photos in a restricted zone. Please identify yourself.
Wow. I had
That's
no idea.
that's when I went. So she panicked. She deleted all the photos, but let's talk a little bit about fear, because that, to me, people, like, okay, I come out of working in mainstream media. I understand sort of limitations and concerns. And I will say this, that a lot of times in mainstream media is that no one tells you what to do, but if you don't do what is expected, you may not be getting assignments. And I have been through that myself, so I can speak to that.
Yeah.
So let's look at, how did you see, was there any surprises with you with when you were following this story in the media as to what you were seeing? And
So if I can compare, okay, so there I am, I'm parked on Albert and Metcalf. And I'm walking around all day long, meeting with people, talking to people, we're dancing, we're eating, we're having, we're just having the biggest Canadian street party, really. And then I would go to my trailer at night to sleep, and I would go through, the Twitter and find out the news of the day. And I'd be reading CBC and Global and City News and CTV, and I'd be like, that didn't happen. That didn't happen like that. They're clearly not on the ground. And I just felt that they just took any little teeny tiny thing and then they exploited it into the worst possible place. Like, they could have taken like a little pebble on the ground, and then they just made it into the biggest mountain of a problem. And it's like, for instance, the Terry Fox. Oh my goodness. There have been pictures from at least 5 different social groups that have dressed up Terry Fox. And because we put a Canada flag on him, oh my goodness, and they ran with that. Even Freeland talked about like how it hurt her children. And it's just like, do you guys not see your hypocrisy? And the reality is, that is just one issue. And every single issue that I see with the feedback that we're getting back, it's completely hypocritical. Either they were hypocrites to something that happened before, or since Ottawa, they're hypocrites after the fact. And they don't see it. It's shocking to me that they don't see their own hypocrisy.
and I want to address this, as you know, as I said, I've worked in mainstream. And I remember one time someone came up to me, and it was on a picket line, and they weren't happy with the story, and they were going on, and they actually, I hadn't written this story, but I was here to do a follow-up, and they went on and on about, you can't believe what you read. And I actually said, no, you shouldn't. And they were so shocked that a reporter said that. And I said, you should always get information from different sources. I'm here today as only one voice, one person. And then if you're not boots on the ground, that's the other thing, is sometimes it's just they start, picking up content from other sources. And I remember, I'm going to get her last name wrong, but she's a columnist with National Post, I believe, right? Yeah. And that was when I read her stuff. I'm like, wow, but she lives in downtown Ottawa. So
Yeah.
she was doing reporting that was started. I kind of went, oh, there's more going on here than I'd realized.
Well, and it used to be that when I was a kid and I would watch, news at night with my parents, they might talk about a hot topic. And what I would notice is that they would say, okay, these are the reasons why we think we should be moving in this direction. And these are the reasons why people want to move in this direction. And it was like, here's a little bit of the story. Here are the pros and cons, both get equal side, and then they concluded. And you, as the viewer, would then come away and you would look around the room, the people you talked with, like sitting with, watching that news, and say, how do you feel about it? What do you think? What did you think about that fact? How would you talk about this? And we were allowed to critically think about it. And we were allowed to make up our own minds and opinions about it. And a lot of times out of that, we changed our minds because we got a new perspective. But right now, it's just like they are drilling down with one narrative only. And heaven forbid you do not follow that narrative, because you will be silenced, you will be ostracized, you will be canceled. In some cases, you will be debanked. You will have your license possibly stripped away from you. I mean, and
Yeah.
this is what so many people do not understand. And we said this when we were in Ottawa. Once they come for us and we're out of the way, they're going to come for you next. And this, we have seen since Ottawa that 3 or 4 social groups have been like they're becoming systematically, sorry, dismantled. And the establishment is coming for them next. So just because you agree with the narrative doesn't mean tomorrow they can't turn a switch and say, and now we're going to come after you. Now we're going to call your free speech. So I say to people, listen, free speech for one is free speech for all, even if you disagree with what they're saying, because if you don't support their free speech, one day you're going to lose yours.
And when back in the day, and like I said, when I was in journalism school, we did. This has been most shocking to me, that there isn't more outrage about issues around censorship or canceling people, because if part of being a journalist was to be explore different ideas and allow for different viewpoints, and to have different voices,
Sure.
because that's how we develop critical thinking, how we develop different perspectives. And I'm going to play, since we're talking 1 year later now, 1 year later, we're coming up upon the anniversary in Ottawa, and there's also talk of an event in Winnipeg. So I know we could go on to, there's all very different roads we could go down, but one of the things that's just happening, and we had talked about this, was the situation in Hamilton, where the Liberal cabinet is meeting for the retreat. Why? But let's go to, this was a clip from CTV of the protest in Hamilton. Here we go.
It seems these days, wherever the Prime Minister goes, there's often a contingent of so-called Freedom Convoy protesters there to greet him. And that was no exception at this week's cabinet retreat here in Hamilton, where protesters camped out front the hotel the Prime Minister, his cabinet and entire staff were staying at for several evenings this week. They even surrounded the restaurant the Prime Minister was dining at last night. As he left, it appeared the protesters swarmed him, forcing his security detail to usher him into the safety of the hotel. Now, Hamilton police say that there were about 100 protesters that descended on the downtown last night, launching fireworks at the hotel behind me, honking horns and waving flags. But despite all that, there were no arrests made and no tickets issued. Now, the Prime Minister this morning took the opportunity to respond to the protests and the protesters, calling them a handful of angry people that do not represent democracy in this country.
It's really, really important in our democracy that people can express their disagreement or displeasure or even anger with various governments. That's really important. And at the same time, our police services and institutions will ensure that those protests remain peaceful and law-abiding. That's something that really matters, and we'll always ensure that people are free to express their perspective.
Now, a year after the convoy rolled into Ottawa, the flags and the horns may be the same, but the numbers are significantly reduced. Still, there's no signs these types of protests will end anytime soon. Ian Wood, CTV News, Hamilton.
What would we do without getting news clips from TikTok? So I love.
Yeah.
So let's break down this report from the perspective of someone who has maybe a less curious mind, and they just turn this on and they are listening to this. What are some things from yourself as someone who's been involved? And I know you have definitely done a lot of research as well about coverage of events, and as someone pre-2020 that was probably going about your life, not thinking much about mandates and convoys.
So the majority of comments that in regard to that event in Ottawa, let me go ahead again. The majority of comments in response to that clip in Hamilton say, see, they're not peaceful and kind. See, they're not quiet, passive, just simply articulating their needs. See, they're angry and they're getting volatile. And what they fail to remember is that there were 3 years of quiet, peaceful, democratic, process-driven protest to get our words heard. We emailed our mayors, we called our MPs, we wrote to the senators and the people in the House of Commons and our MPPs. We did everything that we were supposed to do democratically, quietly, peacefully, respectfully. Then we took to our streets in our own towns all across Canada for almost 2 years before Ottawa. There were people in their own towns doing parades, doing slow rolls, just, trying to raise awareness. We were online trying to get our information out. And then we rolled up to Ottawa, and they still wouldn't talk to us. And they called us all kinds of names. And they made us out to be horrible humans. And all we did was come with more love and more fun and more joy. And we said, we're gonna shoulder that too. So now here we are a year later. And then people are like, oh, see, they're so upset and angry. Oh, we weren't always upset and angry. 3 years ago, I wasn't upset and angry. I was curious. I was wondering if we could have tried a few different things. Like if you compare what Norway and Sweden did, they did very different things and they had very different outcomes. And so what I really feel is that you can't take the context of Hamilton and say, oh, see, that's what all those people are like, when you don't put it into the 3 years that preceded it. So
yeah, that is really some interesting points in terms of I always said it's really important to ask why, and that has been something how I got involved with this and really started watching was when because I'm someone very active on social media, and my son actually says, Mom, you're more Gen Z than I am. Each of my platforms I use differently, right? But I was watching on TikTok, I was watching it. I was following the news. And when I heard about this this group of people gathering at West, and I was watching this, and then I was following as the numbers, on at the freeways, and people were, and I was like, and then I saw the money getting raised, and I was like, oh, what the heck? And then I was watching in Ottawa thinking, oh my God, they're going to start putting blockades up. They're going to prepare for this because they must see it's coming. And there was like nothing. And I went, Are they watching what's happening? There's this like momentum building, and are they preparing in some way, right? And clearly, when we saw the Emergency Act Commission, it was clear that that's when I realized they, well, this is a big part of what I see happening too in the power of social media is that it's not just, you know, it's important, mainstream media is important, but you have to keep an ear to the ground of what I call like working class folk, people that are using other means. And I would just say, even as a reporter, a curious person, I was like, I would have been all over this trying to figure out, oh, I want to talk to people. I want to ask why. Like, why is this momentum building? That's what was shocking to me as to it was seemed to be completely, I don't know whether it was an arrogance or just a complete disregard for this momentum that was building.
Well, I think like if you're talking about January 22 and the lead up to us all arriving in Ottawa, absolutely. In the election term just prior, Justin Trudeau has got this famous speech where he says, you know, they some of them are racist and misogynist. So he wanted to other this group of individuals who, and he was speaking about the unvaccinated. That's who he was speaking about. So when we started to roll in, that's what they tried to do at first. Remember, one of the first news stories that came out was the trucks are rolling because the roads in British Columbia are so bad. So they tried to put it like the mainstream media has tried multiple attempts to subvert what is happening by distraction, by underreporting the numbers, or by misreporting completely. But as we were coming, and it shocked me too, leaving Calgary and seeing the first overpass and seeing, you know, Hutterite women with a baby in one hand and a protest sign in another, something I know they would never do. It dawned on me, holy cow, like I am not alone. We are not alone. And for every person standing on those overpass, there was probably 10 that couldn't make it that day. So it really instilled upon me how momentous this was and how our numbers were actually far greater than they ever led us on to believe. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when we were just talking about the Hamilton thing, because I had heard actually that, you know, there was like 20 people, and I thought, I'm like, am I watching something else on TikTok and other video clips that are showing, you know, crowds? And what was interesting too was that they diverted people. They showed the prime minister's vehicle behind the restaurant, even though he was coming in the front. So a lot of people went back there. So when they were showing, and I was like, okay, and you know, a lot of people struggle with this and say, well, why would the mainstream media do, why would they care enough? And there's lots of discussions out there right now about, you know, funding. And I will say, as a fundraiser, often you do not want to bite the hand that feeds you. And that is an issue too.
I think that Canadians need to take a big, deep breath. And what they need to admit to themselves is that when a government state sponsors media, it is not the open free press, it is propaganda. Full stop. That is what it is. When someone pays you to say something, you will become a spokesperson. So if I worked for any company, and I'm not going to say any on here so that we don't get into any trouble, but if someone hires me to hold something in my hand and talk about it, I'm a spokesperson. I am providing propaganda for that product to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And we can no longer say that CBC is free and open press. We can't. And the only way that they would be free and open press if they turned off the tap from the government and said, at least for their news portion, I understand the arts and the culture and the movies, and I understand that whole section of the CBC, and I believe it's very valuable. But for at the very least, their news has to say, okay, we are only going to take funds from sponsors and subscriptions and advertisers. And then whatever they say is there's, and they might have a slant, but at least then we can say, okay, their subscribers come from sort of this political way, their advertisers are over here, and we can at least see where they're coming from. But when 90% or 99, I don't even know how much it is, but it's quite a bulk of the CBC's budget is coming directly from the government, then you know that they're just telling you what the government wants you to hear, and that is propaganda.
Yes, and we're gonna be getting to talk about propaganda in language and the power of language. We're gonna get to that because there is so much written about this. And as a journalist, if using certain terms, and I remember learning about this in school, is that, do you call someone, a freedom fighter, or do you call them a terrorist? Like, what is the terms you use? And it means something, like, because then you're taking a position, however you describe that. We're going to get to that. But before we leave the Hamilton situation, I do want to go, because we did use the CTV. I want to give another clip from someone that and just for anybody listening right now, Michelle gave a very good perspective one perspective on the media. I am going to be addressing that issue in future shows, looking, in fact, having, I'm a recovering journalist as well. So I'm going to be having people from the journalism world talking about that and what this means, because I do think, how information is power, and how we get information, and how that impacts us. And it's, as I said, I've told people, I said, like, even with TikTok, I rig it so that I hear different views, because I don't want to get in that tunnel of only hearing one view, because that doesn't do me any good either, because I want to be able to get challenged on things, and I have been challenged on things. And okay, let's go to this other. Now, his name is Jason. He is, I'm hoping maybe to have him on as a future guest as well. He's a former radio broadcaster. That does a lot of lives on TikTok. He's lives, not live, Lives. And he also is on a few other channels. And so here, let's play his perspective. And this is sort of another perspective of what we just heard from CTV. This is from Jason. Let's go. I think this is it.
So some were pretty quick to criticize this video in regards to the ranting and the raving and the swearing and things that nature. But can we just take a step back and explore what this is symptomatic of? We don't usually have this thing in Canada, and we've had it a whole lot since Justin Trudeau has been in office, especially post-pandemic era. And really, do you not think that it comes from the top down? I wouldn't expect people to behave any differently when the prime minister of their very own country pointed the finger and said that they were racists and misogynists, and oh yeah, that we take up space. Monkey see, monkey do. In regards to taking up too much space, Mr. Trudeau, I don't think it's me. I don't think it's us. I think it's you.
Yeah. Ooh, ouch. So, I also want to stress here that, that these are TikToks. And for people who aren't aware, TikTok, they are snippets, they are bite-sized pieces of content. But, I have listened to done some research on Jason, and he is someone who is questioning the why. And the reason I wanted to play that particular video, this isn't only about just against one person, because there's a whole cabinet of people. There's a whole party right now that is, obviously one person cannot, well, I don't know, maybe one person can alone do what's happening now. So do you want to comment on Jason's video there, and in terms of what he had to say?
I understand that right now a lot of hostility is going directly to Justin Trudeau, and almost rightfully so. He said a lot of hateful things. Do I think it would have been any different if would the outcome today be any different if O'Toole is in power? I don't know. I think that we would have had the lockdowns. I think we would have had the passports. I didn't see any opposition coming from the Conservative Party throughout all of this. But would he have been so hateful in his verbiage? I don't know. So I think that, and I almost think that they might not have been, because the Conservatives, I think, are just a little bit more careful with their words, given, just given the social climate. I think that they are a little bit more careful with their words. But I do think that there is something very interesting within the Liberal. Sorry, I've got a dog barking.
Okay, now, hey, you know what? This is what, when we're doing video, dog can come on and say hello if you'd like.
Oh no, I've got two sleeping in here, and that's my roommate's dog. So,
Okay.
But Trudeau has taken a very, very interesting position on this. It's one thing to say, this is the science, this is what we're going to do, please toe the line, that's it. It's another thing entirely to start calling people names and pigeonholing them in and stirring up the divisiveness. And the thing is, Justin has talked about this a lot, about how you do a divisive campaign and then how you run through that. I believe in my heart of hearts that he knows exactly what he's doing. And I know if people don't like this, but the whole World Economic Forum, the young leaders, when you listen to the words that come out of the young leaders, the young global leaders from the World Economic Forum, Macron, Arden, Singh, Boris Johnson, they all sound the same. They use the same rhetoric. They use the same divisiveness. And it's almost like they get a script every morning. They're like, oh, well, the WEF says that you can say these words and these phrases, and they'll divide the people so that they're fighting amongst themselves. And then you can just go and do your 72 secret orders. You can go spend money over there. And, they get us dividing, so we're distracted, not paying attention to the big picture. I think what he's doing is 100% calculated.
And there was a time, and for anybody tuning in now and just catching it here, the background is that I am a recovering journalist. I now call myself Chief Curiosity Officer with Gale Now. And I have been working a lot in the world. I worked in insurance. I've worked in manufacturing. And it was only when people started saying, you're the most curious person I know. And because when I hear something, I'm like, let me go research that. And then I go down rabbit hole. Then I go learn about it. Right. And I know you're very similar. And, again, anybody listening going, oh, this is conspiracy theory. No one's providing a script. I will say this. I've worked in public relations. In fact, I work with people, helping them tell and share their story. And one of the things I always try to do with people is explain that, there is marketing behind, everything, all of our products, everything. So do we really expect maybe anything different in terms of politics, especially in this day and age? Is that now, because there is so much on social media and people are learning how to use, there's people connected, and we'll touch upon this too, in terms of, because it's not like, okay, there was a lot of people with the convoy, went to Ottawa with, because they were upset about mandates. The other point I want to make, because I did interview a lot of people that, and this often got missed in coverage, is that not everybody that was in Ottawa, not everybody that's against the mandate are people who are non-vaccinated. In fact, I know people that I've talked to and interviewed that are vaccinated but against the mandate. Mm-hmm. And I said there's actually, and again, I have talked to quite a few people. I travel in a lot of different circles. So there's a few groups. There's the non-vaccinated. There's the people who got vaccinated but against their will. And I know this is not urban. I know two people that were sobbing when they went to go one was to go watch her child play hockey. The other one was to go to a child's wedding. And they were, to say traumatized is not, like, they were really upset. Then there were the people who got vaccinated. They're quite happy getting vaccinated, but they do not believe that anybody should be forced to be vaccinated. And now I'd say there's a new group of people that got vaccinated, were actually probably against the convoy, that now are starting to say, because more information's coming out now, and there's more questions being asked, and I think everybody knows there's more information coming out on Twitter. Some people say it's all still saying it's misinformation. I'm someone though that's like been looking into this, and also hearing from other medical professionals that have said, they're afraid to speak out because they could lose their license.
So there's a lot in there to unpack. I could go anywhere, but I think, okay, listen, if you're a person watching this today and you think, or you really truly believe that the government's got your best interest at heart and that they would never mislead you, I just want you to look at the Nova Scotia numbers. Okay. I did a deep dive into Nova Scotia. So if you just give me a few minutes, I'm going to tell you where to go. So the public health in Nova Scotia stopped giving Stats Canada their COVID numbers back in the fall of 2021. And they just released them 8 months later to Stats Canada, and then Stats Canada has now come out with the stats. And I wondered, well, what would happen in the fall of 2021 to that the health department in Nova Scotia would want to stop giving their numbers. So this is what they found. And this is in a CBC article, like it's all like frontline mainstream media. It's all right there for you to read, but you've got to read it carefully because they throw things around in it. So you really have to, like when you read a headline and you read an article, you really have to read it 3 or 4 times. So I really did a deep dive into this article and I clicked back all the links, and this is how I know what I know. In the fall of 2021, there were 119 excess deaths. Okay. And they looked at what people were dying from, and they said, oh my, only 16 of those are COVID-19 related. So there were 103, so something like about 100 deaths that were not COVID related. That means that every month for September, October, November, there were 30 excess deaths that they did not want to speak to. So they decided that they were going to withhold the information, and maybe they were hoping that the excess deaths would go down or that COVID numbers would go up. And then so over time they could average it out and we wouldn't see those big 3 months. But the reality is that those big 3 months of excess deaths happened and they can't explain them. They don't want to talk about them in the media. I think only New Brunswick and Alberta have spoken to excess deaths, and they did that about 8 months ago. So if you really want to like think about this at a very high level, you need to see the headline, you need to read the article, and then you need to critically think, why would they withhold information for 8 months? This is unusual. This is outside of the norm. They don't withhold. During 2020 and the early part of 2021, they couldn't wait to cram that information out. And then when the information wasn't scary, they said, okay, everybody test. And so the tests went skyrocketing. Fear, fear, fear. And then when they get information that is contrary to their narrative that they don't want to put out, they just withhold the information. And this is now coming out. And you know what? People are not talking about it. And to speak to the censorship, when I do pieces that speak to this and I show clips and I show screenshots and I read verbatim and I follow all the links, I tell everybody how to get it. Those links or those posts that I make, they don't get any views. They 1 or 2 people will comment, 5 or 6 will like, and then it's totally quiet. And I've seen that on a number of posts that have to do with health, a number of posts that have to do with information coming out, and those are the videos that get mass reported, that get taken down, and just don't go through the For You page on social media. So censorship is real, and when there's censorship, you really have to ask yourself, why? Why would they censor this?
And one of the things I can speak to as a journalist doing research is that, you know, and I sort of go, how did I not know this before? I went to go do, again, you know, I've been studying mainstream media, alternative media, and social media. And listen, alternative media has some issues too. There's some really, and I've been talking a lot about this in terms of the pendulum swinging. There's polarization. No, some of the coverage in mainstream, some of the coverage, we can't let alternative media off the hook too, because some of their coverage has been skewed as well. So
100%.
right. That's why I look to social media, because I want to get people who have no agenda. They're not an agenda in terms of, you know, they're not working for, so they're not getting funding. They're not trying to raise money for anything. Now you mentioned you were semi-retired, retired, I guess now. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was doing research on Google, and I think we all accept, I mean, Google is a word. Google, like, if you try to mention, okay, what other search engine would you use? Like,
Go, Chrome, Firefox.
Yeah.
But most people just go to Google. It's the easiest.
I rely on Google. I often say that, I go look. And then a couple of times it happened, I went to go look for something that I knew was like, was getting lots of views on social, and it was like a really big story on social media. So I go to Google because I'm like, well, I want to see the full report. Can't find it. So I'm going, okay, because you know what they say, you know, if you want to bury a body, put it on after page 1 on Google. But I went down page after page. I went into as far down, nothing, couldn't find it. And I was like, oh, that's weird. So then I went to places like Rumble and BitChute, and I was like, oh, so then I thought, okay, a fluke. Then it happened again and again. And I mean, you know, we don't like to acknowledge that, because Google is like, everybody's using Google or YouTube for research. And, you know, now we are on this show right now. I'm using StreamYard. So full disclosure already, we're recording this, but it's going to be equivalent to live, and it's going to be, we'll see. I'm going to post it. It will be on YouTube, but we'll see what happens. This might be a good test to see what happens. But yeah, I think the idea that we're getting all the information, and most people, and interestingly, most people who vote, and I know people that do a lot of analysis of stats, analysis of polls, and, you know, it's been shown that most people that vote tend to be older, tend to be following mainstream media more. So, so that's the other issue, is that, you know, and I think people at times have given up on voting, and then there's a lot of very discouraged people. But before we go any further, I want to, we're going to talk about someone else from TikTok that I've also followed. And as I said, I mean, there's people out there on TikTok that are just saying like things that I just keep scrolling, because there's some pretty ludicrous things of people on all sides that are in a hostile. So I like people that I know have done their research, and I double checked your content a few times, and I'm like, okay, she's right on that. She's right on that. The other person I want to show a clip from also felt that way. And then we're going to come back around. There was something, what was it I was going to ask now about? Probably to do with censorship, but I can't remember it right now. But we're going to talk about language and propaganda, and how that language is used. So, but before we do that, and we could, I mean, there's so much about 1 year later we could talk about. So we're probably going to have to do a follow-up, but let's look at this next video. Then we'll come back. We'll talk about propaganda. And then there's, you know, we could talk about, for people that want to do research, there's a lot. We'll probably touch quickly upon the whole funding, and you know, there was a lot in the media talking about how it was US funded for the convoy, and then it came out during the Emergency Act Commission that wasn't actually true. And I remember, now you've also were either at the commission or watched it, right? Everything, you've seen it from
every single day I watched.
Wow.
every single day.
I watched some highlights. I watched, I think, some of the key ones I was tuned into. Did not watch all of it, but have done some research and followed some other people that had curated content and on all sides too, included. So let's listen to someone from TikTok. His name is Legendary Limey, and he came into this basically. He's kind of a regular, like just got interested, and I think he's a father, and he's do you know much more about him? I don't
Yeah,
have
he's married, has a child. He immigrated to Canada. He actually worked I believe he worked for someone's political campaign on the far left. And then he started to see what they were saying and how divisive they were. And he said, no, this is so hypocritical. And he swung way out. So he's recovering himself.
Well, on that note, historically too, I've always said, like right now, like politically, it feels very confusing to me because, and full disclosure, if anybody that knows my background, I was very involved with unions. I've been historically might have leaned a little more. Right now, I don't know where I fall on things because things like censorship to me are like that's like foundational. Like I want to hear even from people that I don't agree with. And so there's I'll be doing a story about or a show about that because that is the foundation, I think, of democracy is to be able to hear from people, even people we don't like. And like I said,
well, we actually get more out of having conversations that have with people who have different ideas than us. And so many people go into these discussions and they think it's a debate and it's got to be a gotcha moment and it's got to be like, oh, you got spanked. Because I'm starting to do these lives with people online that have differing views, and let's talk about things and say, can we please just get back to just having regular discourse? And you may teach me something and I might change my mind about something and I might do the same for you. And isn't that being part of polite society? But so many people just want to crush, And so anyway, it's interesting. But Legendary Limey's great. And I look forward to seeing this clip.
So this is a clip about the Emergency Act Commission. Now, anybody that tunes in and says I'm cherry picking, whatever, yes, I am. I'm particular. I'm because you can go out and go watch the whole commission. But I thought this goes to when the convoy lawyer was questioning some people with the government. I think it's important that we look at, and we all know this. I've worked with people, from a PR, the selective memory, right? And I know that in PR training, it's like you stick to your messaging, you don't stray. And now I try to use my PR, hopefully for good. And I've told people, when I'm working with organizations that you want to keep your messaging out there and don't let anybody take you down the wrong road. So that's why this is very telling because I think, let's let Legendary Limey kind of assess things for us. Here we go.
What's been really fascinating to watch over the last couple of days since the Emergencies Act inquiry ended, the mental gymnastics being performed by the people that supported the invocation of the Emergencies Act as they try to justify the hateful names our Prime Minister called our fellow Canadians during the convoy protests. And it got me wondering, how far would they go to justify other things? Like, I don't know, that time that Chrystia Freeland couldn't remember which Dave from CISA she was talking to about designating the convoy protesters as terrorists.
And there you say that you need to designate the group as terrorists. So, but it's not your job, but you wanted to designate them as terrorists, right?
So that handwritten note in my notebook, I can assure you that was not a meeting with the director of CSIS, with whom I didn't have a meeting.
It says it's okay. It's with David Vignon from CSIS.
It doesn't say that. It says it's with a gentleman called Dave.
Which Dave?
That meeting, that is not an account of
Which
a
Dave?
meeting with Dave Vigneault, because I didn't have a
which
meeting
Dave is in
with
those
the
notes,
CSIS
ma'am?
director.
Which Dave is in those notes? What's Dave's last name?
I need to see my whole notebook that you're referring to, but I can tell you
It
for
only says
certain.
Dave.
So do you guys believe that she just can't remember what Dave from CISA she was talking to that day? Like, how do you square that circle? And it also makes me think about Katie Telford and how she couldn't remember what the notes that were written down by her scribe said.
So I take it your understanding, she's writing down what you're saying, and you told her that Blair's current strategy is the Emergencies Act. So it was Minister Blair's strategy to invoke the Emergencies Act on February 4th. That's your understanding, isn't it?
No, that's not my understanding.
So what was Blair's current strategy Emergencies Act on February 20 or February 4th, 2022?
I can't speak to what's written here.
You don't remember?
No, if you wanted to pull up notes of mine from February 4th, that might be helpful, but I can't
Okay.
speak to these.
Do you have notes from February 4th?
I have notes from a lot of days that have been provided.
You've been provided? Okay. Have you provided all of them to the Department of Justice?
Mhm.
Okay. And would you say that you provided notes from each and every single day?
From any day I have notes on.
Okay.
So do you believe that too? Do you believe she just can't remember? But later on, she could remember this.
Enforcement. And I think this is you. Sorry, can we scroll up? Was this one of your texts? Ms.
No, it's not
Okay.
actually. So what you can't see there is that also in this chat is the Prime Minister's executive assistant, or was executive assistant at that time.
Okay.
And so that's an example of what I was just describing.
Okay.
So she can remember the details of a text message that's not hers, but she can't remember the details of notes that were written down and shared with her by her scribe. Like, do you guys actually believe that these people are telling you the truth? How do you square that up there? How do you do it? I'm interested. I seriously want to know.
A lot to talk about there. Okay, you want my hot take on it?
Let's give the hot take on that, and then we'll talk about, well, I'll let you start and then we'll talk about the words used.
Okay, so in my opinion, the emergencies order hearing could have lasted only one day, or with the amount of information that was dumped, needed 3 months of testimony. And the reason why I say it could have been done in one day, because every single person that was called to the stand, they just had to say, did it meet the requirement of da 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 da? Did it meet the requirement? Yes or no? And all across the board until the last week, everyone said, no, it didn't meet the requirement. No, we didn't ask for it to be called. And it wasn't until the last week when our cabinet ministers said, oh, we got a legal opinion, which, by the way, we're not going to provide to you. But we got a legal opinion that said it was okay, so we said yes. And then the Commissioner Rouleau could have looked at just that day's testimony and could have made up his mind. But instead, what we got was about 6 or 8 weeks crammed testimony. And this is where I think that this commission really fell short for Canadians. Every single day, the government was just like data dumping. They were literally dropping off boxes online for very small, thin, skeleton crews of lawyers to wade through, to look through. The government knew exactly what they were doing when they would just dump information overnight. And then these lawyers would be up all night looking. Of course, they're not going to be like in perfect shape to be asking questions. So first you have the data dump. Then you only have, like, in some cases, 5 minutes to get cross-examination. So everything was so short. So all to say that I think in this clip, Legendary Limey may be incorrect about Dave, because I also did a deep dive into who Dave was. And those handwritten notes from Freeland were taken from the day that she had all of the big 5 banks on the line. And I knew that because I looked up the name of the person that she was speaking to. She didn't use last names. And I just Googled who is the CEO of those banks. And all of them correlated with a CEO of a bank. So, in my opinion, Dave in this situation is Dave McKay from RBC.
Mm.
So that's what
Curious minds.
yeah, so I just said, okay, where did the document come from? Who did she speak to that day? It was all the banks. That's what that bundle came from. And that is why, I can appreciate the fact that now there's some false information or and she knew exactly who she spoke to that day, right? But she didn't want to say his name out loud. She wanted the mystery. So then we could argue that Chrystia Freeland misled the commission. She misled Canadians. She she misdirected the lawyers. Then we on social media, somebody says, oh, it might have been CSIS. It was probably CSIS. And then we ran with that. And then we also created misinformation and misdirection. And I still don't have 100% verification, but when I look at that bundle of names together from that particular day and who she was talking to, the only person to me that makes sense is Dave McKay from RBC, who wanted to call us terrorists.
Well, and I think the key point here too is that whoever it was, I think the point is that the memory issue, right? Like if you can't remember in your notes, and I mean, if you spoke, I think if I was, a politician, I was talking to someone about designating someone as terrorist, like, okay, I'm sure she talks to a lot of people, but you might kind of remember that conversation because you're probably not having that with,
Listen, if I'm on a Zoom call, which I'm sure that's likely what it was either Zoom or it probably was Zoom. They have the video recording of that. They have audio recording of that call because everything was written out. Everything was heavily redacted. She would have reviewed her notes. She knew exactly who she was speaking to. There's no question about it. So the question is, well, why is it in her best interest to mislead people? Because if she had just said, oh, it's Dave McRae from RBC, well, that would have put Dave McRae on that news cycle that Dave McRae from RBC called Canadians, wanted us to be designated terrorists so that they could have better access to our funds. And that wasn't a soundbite that they wanted to have out. So who was she protecting? Her buddy at the bank.
Yeah. And you know what? This is a whole other topic that we could talk about, is the whole funding. And I know I've done some research on that in terms of, because I remember listening to stories that it was US funded. There was all these, and then it turns out most of the money, and this was most surprising to me, was how much money came from like $20, $50, $100, and how they got up to millions and millions. That's like, that was the most shocking. And then obviously, there's a whole other road we could go down talking about, banks, government, and how accounts were frozen. And one of the things that was probably disturbing also was that people that maybe at the convoy that were married and had joint accounts, the joint accounts were frozen. And I think, just because you're married to someone, you may not hold the same political views, same views in the convoy. So that's a whole other story. And again, for anyone tuning in now, Michelle here is a guest. And again, going back to Google, the reason I wanted to do this as part of Curious Minds is that there is a lot of information out there. If you go Google and learn about 1 year later from the Freedom Convoy, there's lots of information. So today isn't about me coming in and saying, well, here's the other view, because there's a tidal wave of information of other perspectives 1 year later. And part of my Curious Minds show is about being curious, not judgmental. So today is about having Michelle as a guest. She's a guest on the show who has, I've been following her, studying her, and she's done a lot of research. And you don't have to agree with everything she says. I am not here to get into, just for anybody wondering, like, as a journalist, why am I not, pinning her down on other questions, is because there is so much other information out there that could, and if you want to go read that and listen to that, there's lots of opportunities. But today was about being curious and hearing another perspective and hearing from someone again. And purposely, Michelle, I wanted you on because I knew your history too. You've been a business owner. You are, it's not, you haven't been a lifelong radical person out there. And even that term radical, right? It's like, and over the years, I have had, again, for anyone that's not aware of my background, I was at Carleton Journalism School, which is considered, was considered one of the top journalism schools in the country. And the reason I chose to go there was that it was, I think some things have changed, and that'll be a whole other story. But I went to journalism school. I've also I ran my own business. I had a bed and breakfast. I've been a fundraiser for a culture and recreation complex, and I manage an advertising and promotions department for a very large company. And then in recent years, I've had my own business, which is Gale Now, and Curiosity has been I call it the main tool I use as part of a 3-step process that I use, which is sign up, suit up, and show up. And it's really important that we do all of those things. And suiting up is doing research. So, and I see now this, as I'm saying this show up, the sun is streaming through my my office window here to see. So I want to just give that context for anybody that's maybe joining late so they can understand a little bit about where I'm coming from. And then maybe just to start to wrap up, because Michelle, there's a whole list of other things that we could talk about. So we might do a follow-up. I have a couple of other people lined up that will probably be talking about this topic too. As well as my show will also be talking about many different topics related to curiosity and delving into behind the scenes. But let's talk about the verbiage used, including terrorism and or terrorists. And the title of the show today was Freedom Convoy / Occupation. Let's address that, because when I did a lot of research in mainstream media, they referred to the convoy as occupation. And almost now, if you say you support freedom, you're can be attacked for that. It's like we've seemed to have lost like the like being able to say that you advocate for freedom. So I'll throw it over to you now.
Sure. So language is very, very important. And there are people that would say that English is a forked tongue. We have a lot of words that sound the same but mean different things. And we have a lot of words that are used in a certain way and people aren't using them correctly. And I mean, one of the big words, of course, was the way that they changed the definition of vaccine to meet their needs. I mean, that should have been a huge red flag for people, but it wasn't. So when we arrived in Ottawa, again, we were parked there by the police. They knew we were coming. They told us where to park. We parked accordingly and we stayed. And very quickly on, they came up with a term occupation and calling us domestic terrorists. So, and there's a lot of people bantering back and forth. And fortunately, they were just going to their typical like online search engines and just reading the definition there and thinking that that fits. So I thought, you know what? We need to speak truth to words. So I actually bought the Black's Law book. There you go. Okay. 11th edition. It's a huge book. Sorry, I'm trying to get that on the film. Like, it's huge, right? Like, this is a massive book, but I'm like, you know what? I want to figure out why they're calling things certain things and to speak truth to that. So why don't I first just look up the term occupation for everybody? And I found this really interesting. And sorry, I'm going to have to put my glasses on if I can find them. Here they are. Getting to that stage in life, glasses stage.
I call it the magnifying glass right now.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me look much more smart. Okay. Occupation. There's four definitions. Okay. I'm reading it right out of here. An occupation, 1, an activity or pursuit in which a person engages. a person's usual or principal work or business, right? What is your occupation? What is your job? Okay, that's easy to do. The possession, control, or use of real property, occupancy. So, to speak to that, we never had possession of it. At any time, people moved their vehicles. We didn't have control over it because we had, the police told us where to park. They told us what lanes to stay open. And we weren't using, I guess you could say we were using it for bouncy castles and walking around, but it wasn't, I don't know. I look at real property as buildings, but that's just me. So maybe someone could say, no, real properties can be streets, but I still don't really see how that fits. The seizure, number 3, is the seizure and control of a territory by military force. The condition of territory that has been placed under the authority of an army. Well, that wasn't us. No force there. And again, the 4th one is the period during which territory is seized by military force. So to me, those definitions don't strike me as occupation, because I see that it needs to be much more of an army comes in or a military force comes in, and then they have utmost control over the area. And we didn't have that. There was always police, there were paramedics, government was walking through, civilians of every, of all types, whether you're for us or against us, media was there. So, we weren't the ones at the checkpoints. The police were the ones at the checkpoints. So by all definitions, we didn't have the control. The Canadian government and all of its arms had that control. And I don't know. So I think that the word occupation was misused, and it helped to inflame the situation, because they could have just said there are trucks parked on Wellington and they're creating a noise and a disturbance for some people who live close by. Okay. Or it's an occupation. Well, that inflames things. And it's an easy catchword. Oh, well, it was an occupation, so it was bad. Instead of saying, there were a lot of trucks parked there. Why were they parked there? And to your point, get curious. Why were they there? Why were they making noise? So that was an interesting one.
That's very helpful. You know what? Because I've done in my days reporting, words you use, we talked about that, freedom fighter, terrorist. Different terms are used, and then you see them change sometimes, and depending on countries and how they view other countries. And often I'm talking about the US. And, one of the things I will say is that, when one of the things that was shocking to me, because I used to somewhat tongue-in-cheek likes to say to some of my friends in the States when they used to talk about land of the free, and then I'd say, oh yeah, well, can you go to Cuba? And there was all of those restraints about going to Cuba, and I used to kind of kid them. And then I kind of had to eat words when in Canada, our prime minister said, you will not get on a plane. People couldn't even travel within Canada during the mandate, which that to me was the most shocking, I think, when it really hit home that people couldn't leave their own country, like couldn't leave Canada, go from province to province, and people missed because, and this is another issue is, and this is another contradiction I find around choice. Like, if you're going to advocate for choice, where does that line get drawn? And I see the same about capital punishment, because one of the things I said is that, you have to look at a life issue, and you have to look at it's important to be consistent. Mm-hmm. And I had this conversation with someone recently saying, people can be pro-choice and pro-life. It's possible to have both. And this was a politician, actually it was a conservative politician, that found that quite surprising. And I said, no, there's a lot of people that actually hold those two beliefs. And also that, censorship, you can't just protect people's right to say what they want to say, like in terms of, and we've heard this, more on the left. And in terms of the whole left and right, it's very concerning because it's getting very blurred right now. Well, no, not getting, it is blurred in terms of people. I've heard this too. People don't know where their home is politically. And a big part of this show is about addressing the need to have more discussion. So I want to thank you, Michelle, for coming on. And, you provided a very moderate approach to answering some questions. This is, yes, it is one perspective. It is your perspective, but you've also done so much research. So I really appreciate that. I want to thank you for, stepping into the spotlight and sharing your story, sharing also your personal story about your own health, because that shouldn't have to really be something that you have to disclose publicly, that you didn't want to get a medical, I say vaccine, but now more information is coming out.
It's an injection.
Yeah.
and they're saying it is gene therapy. I mean, that has been spoken by very high ups from the medical world, not the fringe, but by the established medical community has come out and said, hey, if it weren't for this COVID, we wouldn't have been able to test this gene therapy injection on people. They've admitted this. This is not a secret. They have admitted it, and whether people want to hear it is up to them. And I understand there's a lot of fear, but we can't move forward in our life if we don't face our fears. So I think people really need to open up their eyes and take the time that it needs to, yes, quote unquote, do their own research, to, read a newspaper with discernment, read the entire article, read it a couple of times, get curious, and then face the fear that comes behind that, because I do believe that we have been lied to for years. And it's not just the last 3 years. I think we've been lied to about a lot of things. I wouldn't have said that 3 years ago. But the more I look into it, it's not a left versus right thing, because Harper sold us out to China through FIPA. I mean, that's a huge conversation. Other governments have sold us out to, like through NAFTA. There's a lot of people that think that NAFTA was one of the most significant sellouts and losing our sovereignty. Now we're coming into central bank digital currency, and people are going to be sold. We're in a financial crisis. So if you just do CBDCs, it'll solve all the problems. But they don't realize that CBDCs don't solve the financial problem, but the government is going to sell us central bank digital currency to say, well, it's secure and it's secure and efficient. So it's like it was safe and effective, and now it's going to be secure and efficient. And we're going to be sold something that once we get into it, we may not like the outcome of that. So we are at a very, very pivotal point in human history. And if people don't take the time to quote unquote do their own research, it will be to their own detriment. People like myself who have our eyes wide open, we've gone all through the stages of grief of what we believed Canada was and what we see that it is right now, and where we believe that our governments, and it's all of them, believe me, Pierre is going to take us. He's going to just take the baton. That's all that man will do now, is he is running with a baton. And we, the people, it is up to us to get educated and then say to our family, our friends, our communities, what kind of Canada do we want to live in? What are our values? What is important to us? And if people say, no, you know what, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is important to us, then we need to acknowledge the fact that the mandates that we had were against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in this country. And we need to speak to that. So that would be my encouragement for 2023 for anybody watching, is I know that you love your life. You have you have your hobbies, you have your date nights, you have how you normally spend your free time. But if you're hearing what I've said, anything that I've said on today, and you are curious about it, I would implore you, and it's going to take at least 6 months of you taking your normal free time and diverting it to listening to alternate sources of media, whether it's someone like Gail or, you've got The Signal, you've got Western Standard, just try to add a few alternative media pieces into what you read every single day. If you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter. That's great because it's got a lot of news sources. If you're more visual and you like to have more clips, get onto TikTok. It's great for that. And it curates sort of what you like and engage in. But for the next 6 months, I believe it is every Canadian's duty, their democratic duty, to spend time researching what has happened the last couple of years, what we're looking at right now with our financial and healthcare crisis and MAID, and where the government is taking us in the future, because your kids' futures depend on it. And just the last thing I'm going to say, and I know this angers a lot of people, but I truly believe that we here in Canada are currently what 1979 Iran was, where there was a change of leadership, a change of rules, and at the very beginning there was some protesting, but they squashed the protests and people just said, okay, we're going to live under this new regime. And now 45 years later, you have young people, the grandchildren of the people who ignored it 40 years ago, are now dying in the streets so that they have freedom. So each and every Canadian needs to take a good hard look at the choices that they're making in the here and now and say to themselves, do I want my grandkids to be dying in the streets for what I gave up today?
And I think I am probably going to have someone carrying the baton on from that. And there's a couple of things that you said that I think will be future shows which we're going to be discussing. And I think people when they hear that, they can't really grasp that will happen in Canada. And I think, and you know what that is, and I think it's a matter of, getting educated. And also, I often wonder, what if the convoy, whatever you want to call it, hadn't happened, maybe we wouldn't be having these discussions. And the other thing I would say in terms of, mandates and vaccine, wherever you may fall. And one person that for me that I heard was Dr. Malone, and he was the originator of the mRNA vaccine. And I encourage everybody to go listen to his story, because he has, he took the vaccine, just really listen, because when he was involved with a lot of, when the COVID vaccine came out, he actually, took it and followed along until he started diving into it. And he had no financial connection, whereas a lot of other people on the committee related to that did. So anyways, that for me was a really good eye opener to understand from someone who was very key to the origin of mRNA vaccine as well.
And someone else that, there are a lot of doctors that are starting to say new things. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Campbell coming out of the UK. Now, he is a nurse. He actually taught nursing at a very high level, and he has a PhD. So he's a PhD doctor out of the nursing in the UK. And he did a lot of education and whatnot. So he just, throughout the last 3 years, he would just go on his YouTube channel and he'd say, okay, these are the numbers, this is the concerns. And he would just take you out. And he was pro-vaccine, pro-everything. And over the last 3 years, to watch him has been incredible, because things just didn't make sense to him as an educator, as a professor, as a PhD. And he now is the one that is raising the alarm of the excess deaths in the UK. So there are a lot of healthcare providers or healthcare professionals who have been censored. There's at least 100 of them that I know of on Twitter that were censored and actually deplatformed on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter. And then you have to say to yourself, well, who did I see the last couple of years? Follow the money. The Canadian government has spent hundreds of millions of dollars paying doctors to tell you what they wanted you to hear. The UN has got a program called Team Halo. Doctors from all around the world are pushing out the UN and the WHO information on social media. That's what they're doing. So all the doctors that you saw while you were in lockdown on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, all of these doctors were associated to Team Halo and all the way up to the UN and the WHO. And some people say, well, no, that was good that they were there. But okay, so if it's good that they're there, what do you say about the censorship of the people that had some concerns and had some questions? Why couldn't they be in that space as well? And if that doesn't ring some alarm bells for you, I'm very concerned about your children and your grandchildren's lives in Canada. Very concerned.
Definitely, we need to be asking more questions, and we're gonna wrap up. But I will have someone on talking about. I know you mentioned Pierre, and I believe that was Pierre Poilievre, who leader of the Conservative Party. Because the other issue that's now coming up is that, there was a lot of talk about, and I did want to just get this in here, is that, the convoy was about overthrowing the government and that. And
could have been further from that.
Yeah. A lot of the people that I've been following and listening to, yes, there was. And I think that, James Bowder, there was another group, and this often got missed because I thought this too. I thought it was this big coordinated action that was making its way to Ottawa, and they were all, and at first I thought, is this part of some group? And what's most interesting, it came out during the commission, it's continuing to come out, is that there's many different groups of people, but the majority, it seemed to be the majority of people. I know the majority of people, when the people that I talked to that went up there, my friend that walked among, was that these are just regular people. A lot of them weren't truckers. They were just people who were upset. You're one of those people upset about the mandate. So just wanted to make sure that was also clear, that there's a lot more. And when you do the research, I spent some time even on Wikipedia looking, and Wikipedia is another thing. You have to be very careful what you read on Wikipedia, because there's definitely censorship there, because I've seen that. So you have to look at everything, as you said, with discernment, which is what I do. So I question when I'm reading something, and some of the things on Wikipedia, I thought, okay, that seems pretty close. And then there's some other things I'm like, gotta check into that.
So, to speak to the convoy, it's, the Freedom Convoy to End All Mandates is what the full name of it was started. One woman, Bridget Belton, said, enough is enough. She went to her friend, Chris Barber, and they started talking amongst themselves. And then, it caught on like wildfire. And it caught on with the truckers who would have their livelihoods affected by the mandates. And then through social media, they started inviting people, anybody who was affected by the mandates or disagreed with mandates. And then all the big organizations all, said, okay, well, here we go. We have to support this. So this is where you get grassroots individuals, a trucking organization, and then all the hundreds of freedom groups all across Canada. So you get frontline nurses, you have Taking Back Our Freedoms, Await Canada, Canada Unity. And so all of these groups converged in Ottawa. And yes, it was mentioned during the commission that during that first week, the big groups, the really established national groups, they did come, and there was a clash of power. But like all things, power goes to the purse. And Tamara had the GoFundMe, and she got the crown. So that's, what happened in Ottawa is no different than happens in the rest of the world. So, in how things work. So, yeah, so
She also
Tamara.
went to jail, and she
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I
there
mean,
was
that's it, right? Like, do you really want that? So she, it's called Freedom Corp. So Tamara, Chris, Bridget Belton, and about 10 others in that circle. They have charges against them. They have limitations of what they can do in civil society. They are named on multiple lawsuits, some up to $400 million. But what I will say to that is Bridget Belton right now is really championing for the people. So she went to court the other day, and through her and her lawyer, they basically said, because these lawsuits are now going not after just the people who are physically present in Ottawa, they're seeking to put the lawsuit against all the people who donated to the fundraiser. So she and her lawyer said, well, listen, we didn't actually do any destruction in Ottawa. Yes, it was a noise, it was a kerfuffle. But she said, we can look back to Native Americans who have actually destroyed infrastructure. And if they had a fundraiser, can we go after their donors? How about Black Lives Matter that actually, blew things up? And like the churches that went on fire, the places that were destroyed, all the businesses that were actually physically destroyed. And they basically said, do you want us to go after all the Canadian donors for Black Lives Matter? Because we can literally, like, if you're going to go after donors over here and you say that that's okay, then you know what? We're going to open up every single other social movement. And if there's been any disruptions, disruptions and destruction, we're going to go after the donors from those. So we've got some really interesting legal stuff happening. Sure.
I do agree. There is some, and I often say, be careful what you wish for. And when rules, even with the Emergencies Act Commission, and you're right, another politician, another party could come in and use that against you. This is what I have been saying this for so long. I'm like, you do know that it's like any political party. Once the rules are in place, if you say that you're okay with these rules, someone else could take those rules and apply them against you. And I don't understand why people aren't seeing that. And again, that's why I hope people tuning into Curious Minds will see that just, wherever you may fall, this isn't about convincing anyone to say that, and you can even, if you support the mandates, okay, if you support vaccines, whatever, but just keep in mind that there's, this people are not happy, and it's not only the unvaccinated. I think that's really key. A key point that a lot of times gets mixed is that people that are against mandates aren't necessarily the anti-vaxxers. They're not like it's like being pro-choice and pro-life. You can separate these two concepts and have both those beliefs. And curiosity, my word I picked for this year too is humility. And I know without curiosity and humility, we will never have peace. Because if we can't also, as a society, look inward and say, hey, let's not just believe what we believe because we've heard it 10 times. But there's another way of looking at every topic, and then also looking at the future, looking at what's going to be coming at us in terms of, mandates is just the start. And I also am going to be, so now I'm going to be talking a little bit about future shows as well. So, okay, we're going to wrap up. And Michelle, I'm just going to have you go into the green room. And I want to thank you again for sharing your insights, views. And again, it gives that other perspective. And I really appreciate that you sharing with us, because it is another view to counterbalance even a little bit someone else is out there. And I know you do TikToks, and you I believe you're actually having a live with Christy, right?
Yeah, live with Christy tonight. So this is something that I am really encouraging people to do if they feel comfortable. And I'm inviting lots of people who disagree with me. Then let's just come on and let's have a mature conversation. And you say your points, I say my points, and let's just get it all out in the open. And I'm really hoping to continue to do that because I think we need to start demonstrating how we can dialogue with one another, and that's the only way to, you know, bridge the divide that we have in Canada, which is civility again. Yeah.
All right. Well, that is a good way to end. Civility and peace and curiosity. Okay, I'm going to have you go to the green room, and I'll see you there.
Thank you, Gail. Pleasure. Thanks everyone for watching.
Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening to this show today, Curious Minds with Gail Now, and having Michelle on as a guest. And again, my show is about interviewing people, hearing different perspectives. I have some upcoming guests. I have someone that is another former journalist that will be talking about why he got out of that world and now has his own company. I'm also going to be touching upon some manufacturing topics, which also, it also impacted the world that I was working in terms of manufacturing with the border closing. And there was a whole issue that came up around how essential workers were determined. And what was interesting was that, they determined if engineers were going, one example, engineers were considered essential if they went back and forth every day, but not if they went back and forth periodically, which in the world I was working in, they didn't necessarily have to go back and forth every day, but if they didn't, they weren't considered essential workers. I'm also going to be talking about the world of plastic bans and looking again from what's happening in mainstream media, what's happening in alternative, and what's happening on social media. And I look forward to hearing your comments and sharing your views. And I just ask that, one of the things I really try to encourage is that can we sometimes even disagree without being disagreeable? And that is probably a good mantra of what we have to do as a society and looking at topics. And I hope today maybe just was about being able to just hear another view. You don't even have to agree, but just thank you for tuning in and listening and joining in the world of curiosity.